Florida lawmakers are taking a stand against sexual material being taught to children in school without their parents' knowledge or consent. The Parental Rights in Education bill aims to bring transparency when discussions regarding sexual orientation or gender identity occur in the classroom. And joining me now is Jay Richards, Senior Research Fellow for the Heritage Foundation's Devos Center for Religion and Civil Society. Jay, welcome back. Always so good to see you. Talk to us more about this bill and why it was put forth in the first place.
Well, it's unfortunate that a bill like this is even necessary, but Florida, like many places in the country, unfortunately, are dealing with an onslaught of what we could just call gender ideology. So this idea that biological sex of male and female, that's not a real thing. What we actually have is this kind of internal subjective idea of gender identity, and this is getting earlier and earlier in the curriculum, so that even kindergarten students now, unfortunately, very often introduced to these explicitly sexual topics. Florida took a stand on this, and I think they're exactly right. They basically said, we're going to side with the parents on this. So we're not going to ban particular topics, but we are going to insist that in elementary school, so K through third grade, that schools be transparent so that teachers and parents are on the same page and parents know what teachers are talking about. And then also just prohibiting the introduction of these explicitly sexual things to our youngest school children. I think this is really just common sense.
Yeah, Jay, I want to go back to that. You know, what would be the rationale for talking to students as young as 5 about sexual orientation and gender and talk about the danger in doing so?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the claim on the other side is that this is actually what kids need, and not raising these questions is actually harmful because there are going to be kids who are struggling with their gender identity. But if you actually look at the details, if you look at so-called social transition, in which, say, a school will take a boy and use a female pronoun or something like that, that has very severe psychological effects. And then imagine if you get them on the track using puberty blocking hormones or cross-sex hormones a little later. Those have very severe psychological and physical effects on their heart, on their fertility, on bone density. They're real physical harms that result from this. And so I think there's absolute medical reasons, frankly, why schools would not want to be introducing this. Unfortunately, they've worked their way into our school system. They've worked their way into our teachers' colleges, so that we've got this ideology, frankly, infiltrating the public school system. And finally, we have a state, or at least some state lawmakers, that are willing to sort of realign things in favor of parental transparency and well-being of children.
And, you know, one thing I want to talk about is I know that some in the media have talked about this, but they labeled the bill the Don't Say Gay bill. Why do you think it's being portrayed this way?
Well, because I think otherwise it's common sense. I mean, if you ask people, okay, do you think parents ought to know what their kindergarten children are learning in public schools? Do you think schools ought to be introducing things like sexual orientation or gender identity? Should we be introducing those to first graders without parents' consent? Almost all people are going to say absolutely not. So I think on the other side, the advocates for gender ideology in public schools, they know it's sort of a losing proposition if they describe this accurately. So they have to mislabel it as the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, which is, of course, not at all what it's about. It's about the well-being of kids, and it's about the knowledge of parents to be in on what's being taught to their children in elementary schools.
Yeah, and I know that Florida, it's not the only state to address this issue. I guess a series of bills were introduced in the Minnesota State House yesterday to give parents more input in their children's education. And then also in Wisconsin, lawmakers introduced a bill earlier this month to create a parental bill of rights. How significant is this push? And also talk about, you know, what that demonstrates.
Well, I think it's one of the most important things that's happening in 2022. I think this reassertion of parents' rights, and frankly, of children's rights, is a really important thing to watch, not just at the national level, but especially at the state level. And so I think that's quite significant. But I don't think anyone should be under any illusions that this is a response to aggressive acts on the other side in terms of inserting these ideas into younger and younger school classrooms. And so this is really a response to that. But I'm optimistic that a lot more states, in addition to Florida, will do something with parents' rights here in the next year.
And Jay, do we know where this bill stands right now in Florida? What's the latest with it?
It's under debate. It's introduced, of course, by Republicans. There's a Republican governor, so if it can pass the legislature, I'm quite certain that Governor DeSantis will sign it. But we're still, awaiting hearings and discussion about it. So the debate is still on. But I'm optimistic that if things continue to go the way they are, that this will be the law in the state of Florida.
We have about 30 seconds left or so, but wondering any advice for parents who maybe are watching this and wondering, what they can do if this is being taught in their schools.
Ask the schools. So go to the school boards, go to the teachers, go to the principals. If your students are in a public school, find out what they're doing about these issues. Find out what they're introducing, any subject, certainly subjects that involve sex and sexual orientation and gender identity. And don't just assume that, well, it's not happening at my school. It's happening in far more schools than people realize.
Absolutely. Well, Jay, thank you so much for your time today. Always appreciate you coming on and definitely speaking with us about this topic.
Pleasure. Good to be with you.